Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you a little some reflections and some observations and some, I guess, a little bit of report on some of the recent events I've gone to and been a part of hosting for Age of Sigmar recently. There's been a few. So I'll go and there's three in particular I'm going to be talking about. So I'll go and give you some idea on how they turned out, what kind of things occurred, how they were built, how they were structured, how the people playing were just basically from my own observations and from discussing things with people. It's very interesting to see just what kind of differences and how people will host events, whether they're really even interested and enthusiastic about it, or they're doing it for different reasons. This picture is from a game that actually is between my son and I at a local shop where they used a Warhammer World event, a game one-day event structure, which was called the Trials of I guess it's called Oghir or Oghir. It was done back in December, and it's pretty interesting. There's 3 different games, and I'm just going to go ahead and I have the packet with me, so I can go. I'm going to show you some pictures as I go through it. I brought my undead. My son brought his ogres, and the idea was he played 3 different games where there were some awkward or weird things you could do to gain points that I didn't really like. I think they kind of took a little bit away from the game, but they were kind of funny and fun, and my son was interested in them, and he partook in them, but they were a little goofy, and they kind of fell in line with some of the silly rules that you see in some of the the legacy army war scrolls that you saw that thankfully were for the most part have been removed when you see the Alliance books updates, the Grand Alliance books. But just to give you an idea of how this all went down, it was I believe you brought, if I can find it, I think it might have been it's all based on wounds, which totally is legitimate. I don't think that, excuse me, this was not on wounds. This was on models. I think wounds is legitimate, even though it's not, all wounds are not equal. If the scenarios will provide you with rewards for a diverse army, not a skewed army, then wounds is a good way to do it. This one was done on models. So you brought 30 models, but you could not bring any wizards. The reason why you can't bring any wizards is because you had to elect a unit, one model that was considered an ice wizard, and this ice wizard had its own special abilities and powers that were specifically for this game, and you use that as your spellcaster. So everybody had the same kind of magic capability, and there was prizes that were for various things. You wouldn't just steamroll this tournament. This is not a tournament where you would just walk in, beat everybody, and gain enough points. You had things you had to do that were non-standard from historically organized tournaments would provide. Yeah, you got some points for killing and whatnot, but you had to accomplish certain goals, and that's pretty much how. That's my theory on how to build an event. My input with the Gamer Grunts is that in that regard, and we're definitely on the same page with the Gamer Grunts guys that we want to provide incentives for not just the battle part, but for objectives and the like. And this had that, which is cool, but it also had some other goofy stuff. So I'll go over some of that. You had in the first one, you had a situation where there was I believe, if I remember correctly, you had it's called a unstable ground. This is on the Battle of Loch Rothadier, or whatever. It was a very, very unusual name. And you had this unstable ground situation where at the end of each round, you rolled a die for each of your units that fell into potentially could fall into the ice. You're on one was a defender, one was an attacker, which seems to be reasonable, but there's a chance that that you could fall into the ice and lose models. So it was it was all right. It didn't really have a huge, in my opinion. I went back the other direction in my picture, sorry. So this is my son Ethan when we first set up. So he had a reasonably nice sized army here, but the idea was to deny your opponent. I think if I remember correctly, there might have been a moving marker that denoted where the I guess the lake was, or maybe the entire board was considered a lake. I don't remember that much, but you got points for if you're ice. You really, a lot of these games were about sacking the quarterback, going after this ice mage. If the ice mage survived, if you killed your opponent's ice mage, if you killed a unit with the monster keyword, you got some points. If you cast a specific spell that was unique to your ice mage, like this Lake of Ice spell, which I guess would help accelerate the idea that they would fall through the ice, if you had units that were within 5 inches of the lake bank at the end of the game, which I believe was on the other side of the board, and if your defender denied you of doing so. So that was interesting. You're trying to get across the ice before you, and flyers were obviously not going to take these mortal wounds. Interesting idea. The next one was called the Yeti's Lair, and the actual defender was in a circle, in a bubble in the very center, and the attacker's forces would attack from all the way around. They had a deployment fully around the board, and they were wandering Yetis that would attack your units, which really weren't combats. They just were mortal wounds that they would come in and attack. They were just symbolic of the fact that there was a battle and you took some casualties. So it didn't take away from the mechanics of the game otherwise, and you fighting with opponents. And so the setup was pretty interesting. I like that you had to think about, as a defender, you were kind of potentially surrounded. And you get points for if you killed the ice mage, or if your ice mage survived. That was the most. You really had to protect your ice mage in these, and it could be any model. For my son, it was his butcher. For me, I think I had I just had my Banshee. I just said that was the ice mage, and you didn't have the stat lines and the profile, the war scroll for those. You just used the profile that they provided you with, and with a couple of special spells too. I think it was like 3 special spells that you then used throughout the game. So if you managed to use this particular spell, you got a couple of victory points, and if you basically, again, this is attacker defender type thing. So, but this one also had one, if you actually wore like a Christmas jumper, you got a couple of points, which is again kind of silly. If you're wearing like a snow or ice themed top, if you had a Christmas shirt or something on, or anything that had snowflakes, you'd get a couple extra points. These are kind of little goofy things. I didn't appreciate that, but we didn't entertain it, but so we didn't get those points. I don't think anybody did. So then we went to the third one, which I think is called the Avatar of the Storm. And this one was, let's see, once again, Ice Mage, dead or alive, you get points. If you were able to defeat the Ice Mage in one turn's activity, you got a nice boost, which was pretty cool. And then if you use this Ride the Storm spell, and you're able to, I guess, move the Ice Mage within 12 inches of a model, and you charged it that turn in combat, it gave you this ability to do that. You got some extra boost of points. If you chose not to use the defensive spell that the Ice Mage had, which could help you severely in the game, you got a boost because you were taking more of a risk, and it was a really good spell. But then they had this one, if you made any kind of ice or snow related puns, like Ice to Meet You was one everybody was using. That just got stupid. I didn't like that kind of stuff. So, here's the thing that really I took away from this event too. And a little bit early on this. It was interesting. I think the reason why this shop in particular did it was because that GW was providing prize support to local events, like around $250 worth, which is good. I appreciated that GW is trying to support the local shops, and the local shops had incentive to go and try and promote the game. I think it's smart, and I wholeheartedly believe in that in that method. But you really have to be at a shop where the players are interested and where the staff is interested. And this particular shop was one of those places that I was actually surprised they were doing this, because the only time that people were playing this game was really when I came down and demoed for somebody. I played with a couple people there that I know of. They, either just try and give it a shot. Not everybody is into Age of Sigmar, as we can see from all the filth that's going around on the net. It still hasn't died out. But some people, you give it a shot. You don't like it, fine. I've always respected that concept. But some people, of course, just they still play 8th, which is cool. That's their decision. I support that too. But the vast majority of the players didn't move over to Age of Sigmar. They're playing other games, and that's cool. So I was surprised at this particular shop. I mean, there's 4 of the shops that I play at, and of those shops, 3 have an Age of Sigmar presence with players that play fairly regularly. 1, occasionally, and they're looking to try and build up the following, because they're open-minded. This shop, not so much. And so when they said they were doing this event, I was kind of surprised. I spoke to the person, one of the managers, and I said, this is a very, very interesting to me. What precipitated it? And it was purely because of the prize support that he was giving it a shot. Really not enthusiastic. And then when we got to the event, I think there was nobody there except for maybe 1 or 2 guys that really even liked Age of Sigmar. So one guy was just ripping into it right next to the table next to me and my son, to the point where I said to him, what are you doing here? If you won't like Age of Sigmar, why are you doing this? I brought my kid to this event, and you're shitting on Age of Sigmar. Why are you here? And he apologized, which I thought was appropriate. And he chilled for the rest of the event. But basically, he was honest. At least he was honest with me. He said, I'm here for the prize support, which is what everybody was. I could see like a group of gaggle of 4 guys that just were laughing at the game, not laughing at playing and having a good time, which they were also in that camp. They didn't care. They were just like, hey, there's a possibility for some prizes here. I don't have to pay admission. There's no entry fee. It's free. Why not? I'll go and move some plastic toys around, and maybe I'll win something. And everybody got a participation prize, which I thought was cool, but it did take a little bit of the spark and the energy out of it, and made it a little bit less fun, knowing that there were some people that just were there, going through the motions because they got some free stuff. Now, this is not the case for everything that I'm going to describe today. I just wanted to go and explain that, because if you're going to run an event, you got to try to motivate your people. And the guys running it at the shop really, look, they were given the packet. I think the packet was a little silly. I think the game was a little tongue-in-cheek, but that seems to be some of what GW does. And I think that, they've been out of the organized tournament scene for a while, and it kind of showed with this. Now, this was done at Warhammer World. I don't know, if it was somebody, one of the retail guys there that people proclaim know the rules. They don't always. That seemed like any other GW shop. They're just like the rest of us. But, look, this was an organized event. It had some thought to it. It definitely was a fun in mind, not competitive mind type of an event. And, we walked away with some prizes, Ethan and I, which was nice. We did between the 2 of us, we did pretty well with some of these bonuses. And apparently, we took it seriously enough, but had a good, funny time doing it, that we walked away with some other stuff for Ethan's already beefy and tough ogre army, for some lead belchers, which is pretty cool. And one thing that they did is they only allowed you to use the gift certificates on Warhammer stuff. So that was a little unfortunate. There were some other things that I was going to pick up, like scenery and paints, but I got something for Ethan, which was really what I thought was important and really was rewarding. And I got to spend some time with my son. So in the end, it was okay, but it was just the climate was really, it was weird, and it was like having dinner in the enemy camp, But hey, I knew these guys. I played with them in 8th edition left and right. They're very competitive players. This is not really their style, and I understand that. So I can't really hold it that much against them. But there's also a little bit of something to be said about having some class too. Anyway, moving on. So this is from a demo day that I did. I did this at another shop. This shop was called the Bearded Dragon. It's in Bernardsville, New Jersey. They bought like 3 or 4 really nice boards for Age of Sigmar and for 40K and for, I guess, any other table games. And you can see one of them here. This is their jungle board. I worked with them, and I'm going to be doing a series of these of demo days where I'd come and I'd show people how to play the game. So I think we had like 8, maybe 10 players of various different degrees, but all fairly new to the game. Some of them coming from 40K, some of them already at the event. Have already got armies that they're playing. Some of them moving over from 8th edition. Maybe they played for a little while at 8th edition. Maybe they played for a while. They had some armies in various different stages that I told them that they can bring if they want to play. But I started off before they actually broke out and really gave them a rundown on how Age of Sigmar is built, the theory behind narrative, connected, linked scenarios, behind the approach of triumphs, the mechanics of play, obviously very important, but giving them a feeling that it's not just lining up to battle, that there is objectives, there's scenarios, there's something that compels you to play the game, as opposed to same old battle line, or the kind of thing that you get when you do when you're, I guess, in you've done it most tournaments. Even though they have scenarios in most tournaments, typically it's still just a modified battle line. And I'm seeing from what I'm hearing from other events that have been going on with Age of Sigmar that is very much not the case. Some places are trying to just emulate 8th edition type tournaments with AoS rules and with heavy comps. And I really don't like, a lot of the comps that I'm seeing. I hate the lack of freedom, but I am seeing a good deal of scenario and scenery oriented aspects that are really contributing to the flavor of the game. Here's the snowboard that, by the way, that we had. This is dwarves against ogres, and most of what you're seeing here are my collections. I brought this so that people could just get an idea of how the mechanics work, how combat works, how shooting works, the order of combat, all that stuff behind the theory. I spent a little bit of time before we even started playing just trying to go and give the theory of it. But this was a lot of fun. It seemed like everybody had a good time. Some of these people were familiar and regulars at Bearded Dragon and some other local shops that I've gone to. A couple of people came from fairly good distance, and this was their first foray. I know one guy who I've been talking to for a bit is looking to build up his own dwarf army, and he's painting it up, and came down to try and check this out, and really kind of validated. He had never played Age of Sigmar before, and it really kind of validated his experience and his desire and his interest in the game, because he really had a good time doing it. I tried to make it so that the games were smallish, so that they weren't really they wouldn't take too long, that these were, again, experiences. It was a collection of different types of armies. Like, as you can see here, this is like 50 wounds or less. Well, maybe a little bit more now that I look at the ogres, but it wasn't meant to be a balanced thing. It was just, here's some monsters, here's some infantry, here's, some shooters. And, the goal, the goal was more mobile. Okay, so here's when these guys, paired out, and they had, teams here with two guys who had played before and people they had brought with them, and they kind of, tag teamed and divided up their armies. So it was some Stormcast and Bretonnians versus the some Khorne themed chaos. And they did it on the jungle board, and then we had another army on the other side where I had some of the guys, use some of the ogres and the dwarves and play their own game. Oh wait, excuse me, I made my mistake. It was the dwarves versus the lizardmen. This was a cool game, actually. And one of the guys had his own lizardman army, some of which was was nicely painted too, which I appreciated that somebody was bringing more paint to the table. So, but this is a gentleman who actually is from the shop, and who I played with a couple of times, Jimmy. And he has his own collection, and this was amazingly his first foray into Age of Sigmar, and he's been very welcoming with with any games that people might be interested in playing there, to give it a shot. And I definitely appreciate that open-mindedness. So these guys battled it out, and they had a really good battle that came right down to the last turn. And it wasn't in a tremendously big game, and it wasn't the whole table filled with troops. I really think that the game bogs down when you get too big. You could do these big mega battles, which I have also planned and organized for later this month at the same place, which I might be doing at other shops like the Brooklyn Strat, which are going to be huge games and probably a behemoth to, heavy lift to try and organize. But it's a little different when you're doing a mega battle versus two people, with gigantic armies. It diffuses the movement, the thought process amongst many people when you have, a lot of, 8 or whatever many people against one particularly big foe. In any case, These are some more pictures from the battle. Again, we all had a really good time. The people who were playing that had never played before, or this was their first foray, or they had, they had experienced from their partner that they came down with. There was one married couple where the wife was very interested, seemed like she was interested. She's supposedly coming to, to follow-up events. It was they came away very positive. I was very pleased with, I just want to make sure that everybody had fun. That was really it. And then learned a little bit about the game and, just had a good experience. So there you have that. That was again, a good time had by all. And yeah, the Lizardmen, I think, came out on top on this one particular battle. I think the Bretonnians and Stormcast came out, again, these were close fights. They did not, there was no steamroller, there was no, absolute complete, bashing of the armies. Were a mishmash of what you brought up to a certain count. And it didn't have to be even. It was not particularly, it wasn't, down, exact model count and exact, it wasn't some alpha, geographic or, calculus required formula in how to, calculate wounds for balance. They were generally, I don't want to get to that slide just yet. They were generally balanced and the same, and they were close combats, and you could see that people were having a good time. So, and they were competitive enough that and challenging enough that people were they were working out some tactics, and I liked that was good to see, especially with newer players. So the next slide that I have here is actually the beginnings of the Gamer Grunts event, the first event that we have in a circuit that we're doing, and that is that was at Time War Comics and Games. I think it was in Cedar Knolls, New Jersey. It was attended by a few people. Some of us, the Gamer Grunt guys, we threw down with our armies that we brought just in case. It wasn't, I don't think, heavily promoted by the store. I think most of the people that came were actually people that I knew or that I had spread the word about, and it was cool. One of the guys was Paul from the YouTubers community, which is awesome. And there were 3 different events. So one event, as you can see here, there's some dividing lines. This is a mountainous range, an impassable mountainous range, save for flyers, that it blocks line of sight, it blocks movement. You could fly over it. It takes you a turn of movement to fly over it. But the real key is you can see that there's realm gates all over the place. These realm gates allow you to transport to the other side of the board, and it provides you with a whole bunch of different mechanics, and it really forces you to try to think outside the box and utilize your army in a different way that maybe you hadn't. And you're trying to, get through these portals, and you're taking some risks in terms of, whether you leave behind, what do you move forward, what do you move into your enemy's deployment area, which is on the other side of this mountain range. And it was a good one. We have to tweak some of this stuff a little bit. We got to tweak some of the victory point conditions where there are certain incentives versus others to do certain things. But again, this was a nicely painted army. I think Paul had brought his Stormcast, and no, it wasn't a Stormcast. I think it was his Empire and Bretonnian Free Peoples. I don't think he brought any Stormcast. I think his Stormcast is another army that, well, I may be wrong. I'll have to see. I think this might be another person's Stormcast, but I'm not really sure. And then there was this huge Nurgle Chaos, alliance that was pretty scary, and and then of course we saw Arcan with the corn-based Chaos army. So we had a lot of Chaos, which is not surprising. Chaos is pretty popular. And Arcan's not painted. Forgive the guy. I mean, look, this is a fairly new player. He's played a handful of games himself, and he had said it himself. I said, you need a big centerpiece model. You need something big. You can't just go with all infantry. Not that he shouldn't, but I was like, you should get a monster, get something big. Get something that's going to gather up a lot of attention. It'll actually make the rest of your army, work a little bit better. He's got a Demon Prince in there too. So what did he do? He went and he bought Arcan, which I love, and Arcan was good in this game, in this series, but it wasn't. He didn't walk right through everybody. This was a 150 wound, no restrictions. The scenarios it inserted the need for having a diverse army, some cav, some flyers, some shooting, but you couldn't really just load up on all monsters or all artillery or all of any one thing, because you would just not achieve anything from the in the game. So this is the Nurgle oriented Chaos army. So they went up against, I think, around turn 1 against Arcan and the Core Knights. Here's a snapshot of my deployment with my. I had a combination of Sylvaneth and dwarves, mainly because I didn't have enough Sylvaneth to fully flesh out the army. Again, this is from the board where you're dividing everything across. We had another one where I don't know if I'll go into a little more detail later at maybe another video showing some of the pictures, because I don't want to do an actual battle report here. I just want to show you some pictures. Here's a fully Stormcast army that is deployed for one of the games as well. Excuse me. We didn't require people to paint, but anybody who did well with painting would get a, there were prizes for first, for second, for last, for best painted. I think we may have had a participation prize for, best sportsman, stuff like that. And, we wanted to give some good prizes, which was, mostly in the form of gift certificates for the shop. And it worked out really well. We do have some changes, some tweaks that we're looking to make for the scenarios to kind of, you play test with your own group and you learn a little bit in that regard. But it's always different when you get into the wild, when you get different people with different thoughts and different ways of viewing the challenges, and then you never know what's going to actually happen. There could be that one time that something winds up occurring, like for instance with this portal situation, if both players run through the portals right away and they're on opposite sides. Well, what if they're stuck on the other sides and they can't get back? Things like that we have to think of, and we'll be tweaking for future events and future games. We had another one where these geysers that you had to chase after to try and they were ever moving at the end of each turn. They would move in random directions, 2 dice 6 inches, and if you're close to them, you gain victory points. But there's a chance that one of them could blow up, which was pretty cool. And that was a really enjoyable game. I had play tested that with my son a couple of times, and I think that really worked out really nicely. Then there was another one where you had a deployment right dead in the center for a defender, and part of that person's units were in reserve. That was a reinforcements. They came in turn 1, and then the attacker would deploy all around it. And that one was, I think, again, we need to adjust some of it because it really was at a disadvantage for the person with less units on the table and not enough benefit for them for coming in later with some of their stuff. So it was a big challenge. But again, I don't agree. I don't think that you need balance in these games. I do think you need to reward people who are overcoming adversity with that imbalance and gaining some benefit. For instance, if you had like a outlast type of a scenario, I have half the forces or a third of the forces of my opponent. Every turn I survive, I get a benefit. If I'm wiped out, my opponent gets a boon for wiping me out, but I get a bonus for every turn, maybe after the first, that I survive against overwhelming odds. So these are some of the things I think that are important. And so we're going to be looking at trying to make some of those changes for the Gamer Grunts event. The big takeaway here was that we're really moving in the right direction. We've got the right idea. And, minus some tweaks, which every organized event does after their events. They play around with, what worked, what didn't, to get some feedback. One of the things that I got from some of the guys and that I thought myself was maybe we were a little bit too big on the points. I think initially Gamer Grunts was looking to do 200 wounds, and even at 150 wounds, it was hard to finish a game. Some of the games didn't get past turn 2. And that's always a little disheartening, especially because some of the rewards could be later in the game that you can accumulate. So we're looking to make some tweaks and some changes on that so the games can move a little faster. Even an hour and a half for a game, if you go too big with too many things, too much stuff, here's that really nice army of Paul's. It could bog things down, even with tokens and stuff like that. That's my experience with Age of Sigmar. But, we got to think of different ways to make that work. And it could be downsizing some of the size of these armies, or there could be other ways to do it. We'll be playing with that in the future. So, here you have it. It's some different experiences that I've had. I think the big takeaway from the Gamer Grunts game, even though we didn't have, it wasn't a massive thing, it's good to start small and then we'll build up over time with more people jumping on board. Got a bigger one coming up at the Brooklyn Strategist. I think it's next Saturday, which has already plenty of signups. More people than even attended this already in total are going to that one from what I know. So I'm hoping we have enough tables, but it looks like we should. We should have more than enough for anybody who's in the area that might want to come down. So that will be a whole different level of challenge because it's going to be a lot more people, and hopefully we'll have some of the tweaks. Well, not hopefully, we'll have some tweaks in mind, enacted for that for when we get there, and see how some of those changes work before we take a look and see how we might manipulate them for the next games in the series, which I think is going to be one coming back to Time Warp, and then we have one in April for Bearded Dragon, and then we'll be looking at other shops as well as these for the next iteration of what's going to be going on. The main takeaway here is that this was fun for everybody. They came away having a good time. Everybody wound up getting prizes that participated, which I think was awesome. And they came away having this good, nice painting here by Marvin for his Celestine Prime. It was just nice to see an event where it's competitive. Nobody walked away with a bad experience, and that's kind of a challenge because sometimes in these hyper competitive games, you walk away with a bad experience because you got somebody just tables you one of these games, and that's part of the challenge of a hyper competitive game. But if the only thing that you're building the structure for is just to kill your opponent, that's going to happen. It's the guy who gets pounded into the dust, in the game is not going to walk away enjoying that necessarily. I mean, look, I've played plenty of games that I've had a great time, getting beaten pretty badly. But it's the best games I've had have really been kind of like the games where I've lost, but came down to the last roll, and you laugh, and and you have just at the irony of some of these things. But when somebody just steamrolls you from the get go, that's not necessarily fun, in my opinion. I don't think it's fun for everybody. I can't imagine having it be fun on the side of the person who is actually, beating somebody into the ground. That's not a challenge. So you need a structure in the game that kind of makes it more easy for all the sides to have enough objectives, have enough different types of goals in mind that they're doing more than just, hey, let me kill the other guy. And that was what we accomplished. I think it was the biggest accomplishment. And of course, amongst the biggest accomplishments was everybody walking away just with a smile on their face, enjoying a day of gaming. So there you have it, guys. Hope you'll tune in for maybe some of the battle reports that I'll do with some of this stuff. I'm just filtering through again some of the pictures so you can see some of what we got going on. There's my kill. These are my casualties from my dryads, which I really liked, but they kind of died. They fell like wheat. They could dish it out, but they can't take it. In any case, thanks for tuning in. It was a good time had by all. A different perspective for different types of events with different feels, different ideas on how to do something with Age of Sigmar about events in general. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, whether you're a participant or whether you've gone to other events. Share some of your thoughts. Let us know what some of your experiences have been. Positive, hopefully all, but if they're negative too, because that's just a learning experience for us as well. And have a great day, everybody.